My husband, Marcus, called from his aircraft carrier at 3 a.m., his voice shaking in a way I'd never heard in 12 years of marriage. "Vanessa, pack a bag for you and Devin right now, get in the car, and drive as far inland as you can. Don't tell anyone where you're going." Before I could ask why, the line went dead, and when I tried calling back, his number showed disconnected. What could make a decorated Navy officer risk court-martial to warn his family to run? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The phone's vibration pulled me from sleep at 3:17 a.m. Marcus never called at this hour. In 12 years of Navy marriage, through 2 deployments and countless training exercises, he'd respected the communication windows. When his name flashed on my screen, my first thought was that someone had died. "Vanessa." His voice cut through before I could speak. "Listen carefully. I have maybe 90 seconds. I sat up, suddenly alert. Background noise filtered through voices shouting, metal clanging, the distinct hum of the USS Theodore Roosevelt's engine room. He was calling from somewhere deep in the carrier, somewhere he shouldn't be using his personal phone. "Marcus, what's wrong? Are you hurt? I need you to do exactly what I say. Right now. Wake up, Devin. Pack 1 bag each, just essentials. Get in the Subaru and drive inland. Don't go to your sister's in Portland. Don't go anywhere predictable." My hands were already shaking. "You're scaring me. What's happening? I can't explain. Just trust me. Head east toward Boise, maybe further. Pay cash for everything. Don't use credit cards. Don't post on social media. Don't tell anyone where your static erupted across the line." "Marcus? Marcus?" The call ended. When I tried calling back, the automated message said the number was no longer in service. I tried again. Same message. I opened our text thread, typed, "What's going on?" and hit send. The message turned green instead of blue, undelivered. His number had been disconnected. I stood in our bedroom in Bremerton, Washington, wearing Marcus's old Academy t-shirt, staring at my phone like it held answers it couldn't possibly give. The digital clock on his nightstand read 3:19 a.m. Outside, the November rain tapped against the windows. Our son Devin slept down the hall, his dinosaur nightlight casting shadows on his door. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong. Marcus was the steady one, the planner, the man who'd calmly talked me through a burst pipe and a car accident on black ice. He didn't panic. He didn't make cryptic calls that sounded like bad thriller movie dialogue. He was currently serving as a weapons systems officer aboard the Roosevelt, somewhere in the Pacific, or at least, that's what his last official email had said 3 days ago. But that voice, I'd heard Marcus, scared exactly once, when Devin was 2 and had a seizure from a fever. This was worse. This was terror wrapped in forced control. I grabbed my laptop from the dresser and opened it, typing in the news websites I'd bookmarked: CNN, BBC, Navy Times, local Washington news. Nothing unusual. No reports of carrier incidents, no breaking news about military emergencies. The headlines were the standard mix of political debates and celebrity gossip. Then I checked the unofficial channels, the Navy spouse, Facebook groups, the forums where rumors spread faster than official statements. Nothing there either. Just the usual complaints about delayed paychecks and questions about dependent ID renewals. I opened the browser history on Marcus's desktop computer, the one he used for personal things when he was home. He'd last logged in 6 weeks ago, before this deployment. His search history showed the normal stuff: weather forecasts, sports scores, a few articles about best fishing spots in Idaho. Nothing alarming. The rational part of my brain suggested explanations. Maybe he'd been drugged. Maybe someone had stolen his phone and was playing a sick prank. Maybe he'd had some kind of mental break from the stress of deployment. But none of those explanations fit the man I knew. I walked to Devin's room and stood in the doorway, watching my 6-year-old son sleep. He had Marcus's dark hair and my light eyes, currently squeezed shut as he clutched his stuffed orca. Tomorrow today, technically, was Saturday. We'd planned to visit the aquarium, then get burgers at that place he loved near the waterfront. Pack a bag and drive to Boise. That's what Marcus had said. Abandon our house, our life, our routine, based on a 90-second phone call. But he'd also said, "Trust me," and I did. Even when nothing made sense, even when every logical bone in my body said to wait for more information, to call the Navy Family Readiness Officer, to do anything except what he'd asked. I trusted him. I checked my phone again. 3:27 a.m. 8 minutes since the call. I opened my banking app. Our checking account showed $3,847. Savings had another $12,200. If I was really doing this, I'd need to withdraw cash before we left. Banks opened at 9 on Saturdays. 5.5 hours to wait. Could I wait that long? What if whatever Marcus was warning me about happened in the next hour? I made a decision. I pulled out my suitcase from the closet and began filling it jeans, sweaters, Devon's favorite clothes, toiletries, medications. I grabbed our passports from the fireproof safe, the envelope with our birth certificates and social security cards. My hands moved on autopilot while my mind raced through scenarios, each more frightening than the last. What could make a naval officer risk everything to warn his family? A terrorist attack? A nuclear threat? Some kind of accident on the carrier that might somehow affect us here in Washington? None of it made sense. Roosevelt was thousands of miles away in the Pacific. Even if something catastrophic happened on board, it wouldn't put us in danger here. Unless it wasn't about the ship at all. Unless it was about something Marcus knew, something he'd discovered or been told. Something so serious that he'd broken protocol, possibly destroyed his career, to get us out. I zipped the suitcase and carried it to the garage, loading it into the Subaru's trunk. Then I made a second trip with Devon's booster seat, some snacks from the pantry, and bottles of water. I was moving like a robot now, following Marcus's instructions because they were the only solid thing I had to hold on to. At 3:45 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I didn't want and my phone face up in front of me, willing it to ring again. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the rain outside. I thought about calling Marcus's parents in Ohio, but what would I say? Your son called and told me to run, so I'm packing? They'd think I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. The coffee went cold while I stared at my phone, waiting for answers that wouldn't come. At some point, I must have dozed off at the table because I jerked awake to early morning light filtering through the kitchen blinds and Devon's small hand tugging at my sleeve. "Mommy, why are you sleeping in the kitchen? And why is your suitcase in the car?" I looked at my son's innocent face, at the confusion and curiosity there, and realized I had no good answers for him. I had no good answers for anything, but I knew we were leaving. Because Marcus had asked me to trust him, and somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, my husband was terrified of something he couldn't name. The question was, would I figure out what before it was too late? I told Devon we were going on an adventure. It was the only explanation a 6-year-old would accept without dissolving into questions I couldn't answer. He bounced excitedly while I made him breakfast, already asking if we'd see mountains and whether we could stop at every rest area with a playground. "Where's Dad?" he asked between bites of cereal. "Is he coming to the adventure?" "Daddy's still on the ship, buddy. It's just you and me this time." The lie tasted bitter. I didn't know where Marcus was, what he was doing, or if he was even safe. For all I knew, military police were searching for him right now for that unauthorized call. At 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the bank opened, I was parked outside Chase on Wheaton Way. Other cars began pulling into the lot, a woman in scrubs, probably coming off a night shift, an elderly man with a newspaper tucked under his arm. Normal people doing normal Saturday morning things. I envied them. The moment the doors unlocked, I was inside. The teller, a young guy named Brandon according to his name tag, smiled professionally as I approached. "I need to withdraw $8,000. Cash." His smile faltered slightly. "That's... okay, yes ma'am. I'll need to get a manager to approve anything over $5,000. May I ask what you need it for?" "Just for our records." "Home renovation," I said smoothly. "Paying contractors." It took 20 minutes and a conversation with the branch manager, a woman who eyed me with barely concealed suspicion. But eventually I walked out with $8,000 in hundreds and twenties, divided into 2 envelopes I tucked into different parts of my purse. My hands didn't shake until I was back in the car. Devon was watching something on my iPad in the back seat. I programmed Boise into the GPS, an 11-hour drive, then immediately turned off my phone's location services. I'd seen enough crime shows to know that phones were tracking devices. If Marcus said don't be predictable, I had to assume someone might be looking. We pulled out of Bremerton at 9:23 a.m. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The rain had stopped, leaving everything wet and gray. As we crossed the Manette Bridge, I watched our neighborhood disappear in the rearview mirror, the base housing where half our friends lived, the elementary school where Devin had just started first grade, the grocery store where I knew every aisle. I had no idea when, or if, we'd be back. The first 2 hours were easy. Devin entertained himself with the iPad, occasionally pointing out cows or asking how much longer. I-90 stretched east through the Cascade Mountains, the highway climbing through forests still green despite the late autumn season. Traffic was light, mostly truckers and a few RVs heading inland for winter camping. My mind, freed from the immediate crisis of packing and leaving, began working through possibilities with surgical precision. Marcus was a weapons systems officer, which meant he worked directly with the ship's arsenal missiles, torpedoes, defensive systems. If something was wrong with the weapons, if there'd been some kind of accident or malfunction, would that endanger us in Washington? No. That made no sense. Unless it wasn't an accident. Unless someone had tampered with something. Unless Marcus had discovered something he shouldn't have. I'd met other Navy wives who whispered about their husbands coming home different from certain deployments, about missions they could never discuss, about things they'd seen that changed them. Marcus had always been an open book, sharing funny stories about life on the carrier, complaining about the food, sending photos of sunsets over the Pacific. He'd never once hinted at anything classified beyond, "Can't talk about that, babe." What could make a man risk court-martial? Treason charges? A dishonorable discharge that would destroy everything he'd worked for since he was 18 years old? It had to be life or death. His life, my life, Devin's life. Nothing else would push him to that call. Around noon, somewhere past Snoqualmie Pass, Devin announced he was hungry. I pulled off at a truck stop in Clay Elum, a small mountain town that smelled like pine and diesel fuel. Inside the attached diner, we slid into a booth with cracked red vinyl seats. A waitress with graying hair and a name tag reading Dolores took our order grilled cheese for Devin, a turkey club I wouldn't be able to eat. While Devin colored on the paper menu with crayons Dolores had given him, I pulled out my phone. Still no messages from Marcus. His number still showed disconnected. I opened Facebook, my fingers hovering over the search bar. "Don't post on social media," he'd said. But he hadn't said anything about looking. I searched for USS Theodore Roosevelt. The carrier's official page showed a post from yesterday, a photo of sailors on deck during a routine drill. Everyone smiling, everything normal. The comments were the usual mix of, "Thank you for your service," and family members saying they missed their sailors. I scrolled through the Bremerton Navy spouse groups. Same normal chatter, someone asking about dependent dental. Appointments, another, organizing a Thanksgiving potluck for families with deployed spouses. No emergency announcements. No whispers of trouble. My food arrived. I picked at it while Devin demolished his grilled cheese, chattering about a dinosaur documentary he wanted to watch when we got to wherever we're going. "Mommy, you're not eating." "I'm not very hungry, sweetie. Are you sick?" "No, baby. Just tired." He studied me with those two perceptive eyes, Marcus's eyes, and I saw him decide not to push. Kids know when adults are lying, even when they can't articulate what the lie is. Back on the road, the landscape changed. The dense forests gave way to drier terrain, the mountains flattening into hills. Eastern Washington looked like a different planet, brown and vast and open. We passed through small towns with populations in the hundreds, places with names like Vantage and George, where grain elevators dominated the skyline. Devin fell asleep around 3 p.m., his head tilted against the window. I drove in silence, listening to the hum of tires on asphalt, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The gas tank was at half. I'd need to stop soon. At a Chevron in Moses Lake, I filled the tank and paid cash inside. The clerk, a teenage girl absorbed in her phone, barely looked at me. I bought chips, bottles of water, and a Red Bull I desperately needed. While Devin used the bathroom, I stood outside in the cold November air and stared at my phone. Still nothing. What if this was all for nothing? What if Marcus had made a mistake, misinterpreted something, panicked over a threat that didn't exist? What if I was throwing away our stability, terrifying our son, destroying our finances over a 90-second phone call? But then I remembered his voice, the fear in it, the absolute certainty. Marcus didn't panic. Marcus didn't make mistakes about things like this. We crossed into Idaho at 5:47 p.m. The sun had set, leaving the highway bathed in that strange purple twilight that happens in winter. Devin woke up and asked where we were. Almost to Boise, buddy. What are we doing in Boise? Good question. I had no plan beyond getting here. No hotel reservation, no destination, no idea what came next. Marcus had said drive inland, drive east, disappear. He hadn't said for how long. He hadn't said what I should be watching for. He hadn't said if he'd be able to contact me again. My phone buzzed. I nearly swerved off the highway. It wasn't Marcus. It was my sister Jen, calling from Portland. I stared at her name on the screen, letting it ring. Marcus had specifically said, "Don't go to Jen's," which meant maybe she was in danger too. Or maybe he just knew that's where I'd naturally run, making it predictable. The call went to voicemail. Seconds later, a text appeared. "Are you okay? Haven't heard from you today. Devin is sick?" I typed back, "All fine. Busy day. Talk tomorrow." Then I turned off my phone completely. Boise's lights appeared in the distance, a sprawl of civilization against the dark desert landscape. I took the first exit into the city and found a Motel 6 off the highway. It was cheap, anonymous, the kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions. Room 214 smelled like industrial cleaner and old cigarettes hidden under air freshener. Devin immediately claimed the bed near the window, jumping on it until I told him to stop. I set our bags down and stood in the middle of the room, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what I'd done. We'd driven over 600 miles on a stranger's warning, except the stranger was my husband, and the warning had been real enough to make me upend our entire lives. Now what? I sat on the edge of the other bed while Devin watched cartoons, the volume too loud. Outside, cars passed on the highway, people going somewhere with purpose and plans. I had neither. All I had was trust, and cash, and a silent phone that held no answers. And somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, Marcus was either saving our lives or destroying them, and I had no way of knowing which. Devin fell asleep around 9, exhausted from the 11-hour journey. I tucked him in, watching his chest rise and fall with the deep breathing of childhood sleep, and envied his innocence. To him, this was still an adventure. A story he'd probably tell his first-grade teacher on Monday, except we wouldn't be back by Monday. I turned on my phone, keeping the volume low. The screen lit up with notifications. 3 more texts from Jen, 2 missed calls from Marcus's mother, a text from my neighbor asking if I could water her plants next week, the normal debris of a life I'd abandoned 20 hours ago. Nothing from Marcus. I opened the news apps again, scrolling through headlines with growing desperation. Still nothing about naval incidents, military emergencies, or threats to the Pacific Northwest. The world was spinning along exactly as it had been, unaware that somewhere, in it, my husband had blown up his career to warn me about something that, by all available evidence, didn't exist. The doubt crept in like cold water, slow and numbing. What if I'd made a terrible mistake? What if Marcus had suffered some kind of psychological break? Deployments did that sometimes. I'd heard stories at spouse support groups, men who came back different, who saw threats where none existed, who couldn't shake the hypervigilance that kept them alive overseas. But Marcus had been fine. His last email, 3 days ago, had been normal. He'd joked about the chief who kept stealing his favorite coffee mug. He'd asked about Devin's soccer game. He'd signed it, "Love you both to the moon and back," like he always did. 3 days wasn't enough time to develop paranoid delusions. Unless something had happened in those 3 days. Something that changed everything. I walked to the window and pulled back the heavy curtain just enough to see the parking lot. Our blue Subaru sat under a flickering light pole, one of a dozen cars scattered across the lot. A semi-truck idled in the far corner. 2 spaces down, a minivan with out-of-state plates. Everything looked normal. I let the curtain fall and sat on the edge of my bed, my phone growing warm in my hand. I needed to call someone. Not to tell them where I was. Marcus had been clear about that, but to find out if anyone knew anything. If there'd been incidents on the Roosevelt that hadn't made the news. If other wives had received strange calls. I pulled up the contact for Brenda Hammond, another Navy wife whose husband served on the Roosevelt with Marcus. Greg was an aviation mechanic, one of the guys who kept the carrier's jets flying. If something was happening on that ship, Greg would know. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, her voice thick with sleep. Vanessa? It's almost midnight. Is everything okay? I'm sorry to wake you. Have you heard from Greg recently? He emailed yesterday morning. Why? Has something happened to Marcus? Her immediate leap to crisis told me everything. Navy wives lived with that low-level dread, the knowledge that a midnight call could change everything. No, nothing like that. I just haven't been able to reach him, and I'm probably being paranoid, but I wanted to check if Greg mentioned anything unusual. About the deployment, or the ship, or anything. Silence on the other end. Then, Greg said everything's routine. They're doing standard training exercises. He complained about the weather. Apparently it's been storming for 3 days straight. Why? What did Marcus say? Nothing specific. Just a weird phone call. I'm sure I'm overreacting. Vanessa, are you okay? You sound strange. I'm fine. Just tired. Sorry I woke you. I hung up before she could ask more questions. My hands were shaking. Greg had emailed yesterday after Marcus's call. Everything is routine, standard training exercises, which meant either Greg didn't know about whatever Marcus had discovered, or there was nothing to know. Or Greg was lying. No, that was paranoia talking. Greg Hammond was a good guy, a straight shooter who spent his shore leave rebuilding vintage motorcycles. He had no reason to lie to his wife about routine operations, unless he'd been ordered to. I stood up and paced the small space between the beds, my mind spiraling through possibilities. What could be so classified that even the sailors' families couldn't know? What kind of threat would require a carrier's weapons officer to break protocol to warn his wife? My phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it. Unknown number. Pacific Time Zone area code? My finger hovered over the screen. Don't be predictable, Marcus had said. But he'd also disconnected his phone, which meant if he was trying to reach me again, it would have to be from a different number. I answered but didn't speak. Mrs. Wright? A man's voice, unfamiliar, professional. This is Lieutenant Commander Paul Jennings from Naval Station Kitsap. I'm calling regarding your husband, Lieutenant Marcus Wright. My blood turned to ice. Is he hurt? No, ma'am. But we need to speak with you as soon as possible regarding an incident involving your husband. Are you currently at your residence in Bremerton? Every alarm bell in my head started screaming. This was a trap. Had to be. Marcus wouldn't have risked everything to warn me, only to have the Navy call hours later asking my location. I'm not home right now, I said carefully. What kind of incident? I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone. When will you be returning home? I don't know. I'm visiting family. What's this about? A pause. Ma'am, it's important that we speak with you in person. Where are you currently located? I'd really like to know what this is about before I answer that. Another pause. Longer this time. Mrs. Wright, your husband has been declared AWOL. He left his post approximately 22 hours ago and hasn't been seen since. We have reason to believe he may try to contact you. If he does, you need to inform us immediately. AWOL. Absent without leave. The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had deserted his post. He'd committed a crime that could earn him years in military prison. And now, they were hunting him. I haven't heard from him, I lied. If I do, I'll let you know. Mrs. Wright, this is a serious matter. If you're withholding information about Lieutenant Wright's whereabouts, you could be charged with obstruction. I strongly advise you to cooperate fully. I understand. But I don't know where my husband is. Then you won't mind if we send someone to verify you're not harboring him? I told you, I'm not home. I'm out of state visiting family. Which family? Where? I don't think I'm required to tell you my location, Commander. If my husband contacts me, I'll call you. Is there anything else? The temperature in his voice dropped 20 degrees. We'll be in touch, Mrs. Wright. Stay available. The line went dead. I stood frozen in the dim motel room, the phone still pressed to my ear. Marcus was AWOL. They were looking for him. Which meant either he'd escaped the ship somehow impossible, given they were in the middle of the Pacific, or something had happened that forced him off it. Or they were lying. That thought stopped me cold. What if the Navy itself was the threat? What if Marcus had discovered something corrupt, something illegal, something that powerful people wanted hidden? What if that call wasn't really from Naval Station Kitsap at all, but from whoever was hunting him? I pulled up my laptop and searched for Lieutenant Commander Paul Jennings, Kitsap. Nothing came up. I tried Variations Jennings Naval Station. Commander Jennings Navy? Still nothing. That didn't necessarily mean anything. Not every officer had a public online presence. But it didn't give me confidence either. A new text arrived from the unknown number. Mrs. Wright. We can help protect you and your son if you tell us where you are. Lieutenant Wright may be dangerous. Dangerous. They were calling my husband dangerous. I blocked the number and turned off my phone completely, pulling out the battery for good measure. Old spy movie trick, probably useless against modern surveillance, but it made me feel marginally better. The television was still on, volume muted, playing some late-night infomercial. I unmuted it and flipped to a news channel. A weatherman gestured at a map showing storms across the Pacific. Political analysts discussed upcoming budget votes. A commercial for antidepressants played, promising better days ahead. No breaking news about carriers, no reports of military incidents, no emergency broadcasts warning civilians to evacuate. Just the quiet hum of normal life, while somewhere in the dark, my husband was running from something terrible enough to make him risk everything. And now I was running too, with no idea where we were going or what we were running from. I lay down on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Tomorrow I'd have to decide what to do next, whether to keep running or to turn back, whether to trust Marcus's warning or to trust that the world I saw around me calm and normal was the real one. Outside, a car engine started and drove away. Devin murmured something in his sleep, probably dreaming of dinosaurs or superheroes. I closed my eyes and prayed that when I opened them, this would all make sense. It wouldn't, but I prayed anyway. Morning came with weak November sunlight filtering through the motel curtains. I'd slept in 30-minute intervals, jerking awake at every sound, footsteps in the hallway, car doors slamming, the ice machine groaning to life. Each time I'd checked the locks, peered through the peephole, convinced that someone was coming for us. No one came. Devin woke up hungry and confused about why we were still in the adventure place instead of going home. I told him we were staying a few more days, maybe seeing some sights. His face lit up at the mention of a zoo. Kids were so easy to please with small promises. We walked to a diner 3 blocks from the motel, Devin skipping ahead while I scanned every parked car, every person we passed, an older man reading a newspaper at a bus stop, a woman jogging with earbuds in. A utility truck parked near a telephone pole. Were any of them watching us? Or was I descending into full paranoia? The diner was called Millie's, a chrome and red vinyl throwback that smelled like coffee and bacon grease. We took a corner booth where I could watch both the entrance and the parking lot through the windows. Devin ordered pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. I ordered coffee and eggs I wouldn't eat. While Devin colored on another paper menu, I reassembled my phone and powered it on, keeping it face down on the table. The notifications flooded in more texts from Jen, now worried. A voicemail from Marcus's mother asking if everything was okay. 2 more calls from unknown numbers I didn't recognize. And one email, time-stamped 4:47 a.m., from an address I'd never seen before. Email protected. My heart stopped. The subject line read, Sophie's favorite recipe. Sophie had been our golden retriever, dead for 3 years from cancer. Marcus had loved that dog more than anything except Devin and me. We'd scattered her ashes at a beach in Oregon, and Marcus had cried one of only 2 times I'd ever seen him cry. No one else would reference Sophie. This was Marcus. I opened the email with shaking hands. V can't call. They're monitoring everything. Remember our first anniversary? The place I proposed? Check the book I gave you. Page 47. Destroy this after reading. I love you. M. That was it. No explanation, no details, Just a cryptic reference to something from over a decade ago. Our first anniversary. We'd been stationed at Naval Station Great Lakes in Illinois, broke and happy, exploring Chicago on weekends. Marcus had proposed at the Art Institute, in front of that famous Nighthawks painting by Edward Hopper. He'd gotten down on one knee right there in the gallery, and a security guard had almost kicked us out until other visitors started clapping. The book he'd given me that day was a collection of Hopper's artwork. I'd kept it, naturally. It was in a box in our bedroom closet, probably still there unless someone had broken into our house searching for Marcus. Page 47. What was on page 47? Mommy, you're not watching me color. I looked up. Devin had drawn what appeared to be a dinosaur eating a house. That's beautiful, buddy. Is that a T-Rex? It's a Giganotosaurus. They're bigger than T-Rexes. Everyone thinks T-Rexes are the biggest, but they're not. You're absolutely right. The food arrived. I picked at my eggs while my mind raced. Marcus had found a way to contact me, which meant he was still free, still able to move. But he couldn't call, couldn't text, because they were monitoring everything. Who were they? The Navy? Someone else? And what was on page 47 of a book sitting in our closet 800 miles away? I needed that book. Which meant either going back dangerous, possibly exactly what someone wanted me to do, or finding someone I trusted to get it for me. But Marcus had said don't tell anyone where we were going. Did that include asking for help? A man walked into the diner, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a Navy-issue peacoat. My entire body tensed. He scanned the restaurant, his eyes passing over our booth, then settled at the counter. Just a sailor grabbing breakfast. Boise wasn't that far from Mountain Home Air Force Base. Military personnel passed through Idaho all the time, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his scan had lingered on us a half-second too long. Devin, finish up. We need to go. But I'm not done with my pancakes. We'll get a box. Come on. I paid cash at the register, the waitress giving me a curious look as I rushed Devin toward the door. As we left, I glanced back. The man in the peacoat was still at the counter, scrolling through his phone, not watching us, not following, just a guy having breakfast. My paranoia was going to eat me alive. Back at the motel, I sat Devin in front of cartoons and pulled out my laptop. I couldn't go back to Bremerton myself, but I could access our home security system remotely. We'd installed cameras 6 months ago after a string of burglaries in the neighborhood front door, back door, garage. I logged into the system. The cameras were still active. No one had disabled them, which was either a good sign or meant whoever was looking for us was more sophisticated than I'd imagined. I pulled up the last 48 hours of footage and started scrolling through at high speed. Normal activity Thursday. Morning newspaper delivery. Neighbor's cat crossing our lawn. Mail truck. Thursday afternoon and evening. Nothing. Friday morning. More nothing. Friday afternoon at 2:47 p.m., a dark sedan pulled into our driveway. I slowed the playback to normal speed. 2 men got out, both wearing suits. One was tall and lean with graying hair. The other was younger, stockier, with the military bearing I'd learned to recognize. They walked to our front door. The older one knocked. They waited. Knocked again. The younger one peered through the front window, hand cupped against the glass. After 2 minutes, they walked around to the back of the house, disappearing from the front camera's view. I switched to the back camera feed. They were checking the back door, trying the handle. The older man pulled something from his pocket. It looked like a lockpick set. He worked on the door for less than a minute before it swung open. They went inside our house. My stomach turned to ice. I watched them move through our home on the interior cameras. I'd forgotten we even had motion-activated cameras in the living room and master bedroom. They weren't random burglars. They moved with purpose, searching methodically. Opening drawers, checking closets, rifling through papers on Marcus's desk. The younger man went straight to our bedroom. He opened the closet and began pulling out boxes. One of them was the box with the Hopper book. He flipped through it quickly, then tucked it under his arm and left. They'd taken the book. The one thing Marcus wanted me to find, the one piece of information that might tell me what was happening, they had it. The timestamp showed they'd left our house at 3:14 p.m. on Friday. 7 hours after Marcus's call, they'd known exactly what they were looking for. I sat back, my mind reeling. This wasn't the Navy conducting a standard search for an AWOL sailor. This was something else coordinated, efficient, criminal. They'd broken into our home and stolen property. Federal agents wouldn't need to pick locks, they'd have warrants. These men were something else. My phone buzzed. Another email from Email Protected. Plan B. Check your junk folder. Email from 3 months ago about life insurance. Not junk. Look carefully. Be safe. 3 months ago, Marcus had forwarded me an email about updating our life insurance policy through the Navy Federal Credit Union. I'd skimmed it, meant to deal with it later, then forgotten about it completely. It had probably gone straight to junk mail. I opened my email and navigated to the junk folder, scrolling back through 3 months of spam discount medications, Nigerian princes, extended car warranties. There it was, dated August 15th, from Marcus's official Navy email. Important. Life Insurance Policy Review. I opened it. The email looked legitimate NFCU letterhead, policy numbers, the usual bureaucratic language about coverage amounts and beneficiary updates. But at the bottom, after the signature block, there was a line of text in a slightly different font size, almost imperceptible unless you were looking for it. Emergency Contact Protocol. If unable to reach primary, use backup authentication. Checkpoint Charlie, 1989. Document location, TRS-47B. Checkpoint Charlie, the famous Cold War border crossing in Berlin. 1989, the year the Berlin Wall fell. Marcus and I had watched a documentary about it on our third date. We'd joked about Cold War spy codes and how we'd use ridiculous phrases like, "The eagle flies at midnight," if we were ever in trouble. He'd planted this message 3 months ago, which meant whatever he'd discovered, whatever threat he was warning me about, he'd known about it for at least that long. This wasn't a sudden crisis. This was planned, calculated. He'd been preparing an escape route for months, leaving breadcrumbs for me to follow if everything went wrong. TRS-47B. That had to be a location code. Military storage, maybe? A. Safe deposit box? I searched for the designation online. Nothing came up in standard searches. I tried adding military terms. Navy Storage TRS, Defense Department TRS, Naval Station Codes TRS. Still nothing. Then I tried a different approach. Theodore Roosevelt, the carrier's name. TR. Plus S for ship, maybe? TRS. And 47B. Could be a compartment designation. Carriers had thousands of compartments, numbered and lettered for navigation. But Marcus wasn't on the carrier anymore. If he'd hidden something in compartment 47B aboard the Roosevelt, I'd never get to it, unless he'd hidden something before the ship left port. Somewhere on the base at Naval Station Kitsap, where the Roosevelt had been docked before deploying. Somewhere I'd have to go back to find. Devin tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, you're doing that staring thing again. Are you okay?" I looked at my son, at his worried 6-year-old face, and made a decision. "I'm fine, buddy. Hey, how would you like to take a really long drive and see Grandma and Grandpa?" His face lit up. Marcus's parents lived in Ohio, about 2,000 miles away. It would take 3 days of driving. 3 days to figure out my next move. 3 days to decide if I was brave enough to go back to Washington and find whatever Marcus had hidden in compartment 47B. Because one thing was now crystal clear. My husband hadn't deserted. He'd discovered something worth dying for, and someone was willing to kill to keep it hidden. We left Boise at noon, heading east on I-84 toward Ohio. The highway stretched ahead like a promise, empty and clean under a cloudless sky. Devin was excited about seeing his grandparents, asking every 20 minutes how much longer until we got there. I told him it would take a few days, that we'd stop at hotels and see new places along the way. What I didn't tell him was that I was watching every car that stayed behind us for more than 10 minutes. The first day passed without incident. We drove through southern Idaho into Utah, the landscape transforming from high desert into something more dramatic, red rock formations and distant mountains. We stopped for lunch in a town called Tremonton, population 8,000, where Devin insisted on getting a milkshake bigger than his head. I paid cash everywhere. Used rest area bathrooms instead of gas station ones where there might be cameras. Kept my phone off, except for brief 5-minute intervals to check for messages from Marcus. None came. That night, we stayed at a Holiday Inn in Salt Lake City. I paid cash again, using a fake name, Sarah Mitchell, though the clerk barely glanced at me. I was becoming invisible, just another road-weary mother traveling with her kid. Forgettable. Safe. Except I didn't feel safe. I checked us into a third-floor room and immediately wedged a chair under the door handle. Devin thought it was funny. I didn't tell him it was because I'd watched too many true crime shows about how easy hotel locks were to bypass. Around 10 p.m., after Devin fell asleep, I risked turning on my phone. 32 missed calls, 27 text messages, most from Jen, increasingly frantic. 3 from Marcus's mother, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize, and 1 email from email protected, sent 4 hours ago. They know you're moving east. Ditch the car in Wyoming. Take a bus. Tell no one your destination. They're tracking you somehow. Check Devin's backpack. Check everything. Trust no one. I'm trying to get to you, but it's complicated. 2 more days. Hold on. My blood went cold. Check Devin's backpack. I grabbed his Paw Patrol backpack from where he'd dropped it by the TV. Inside were the usual 6-year-old essentials, crayons, action figures, his iPad, a half-eaten pack of gummy bears. I pulled everything out, examining each item. Nothing unusual. Then I checked the pockets. The front pocket held a crumpled drawing from school. The side pocket had a water bottle. The back pocket, the one Devin never used, had something small and hard. I pulled it out. A black plastic disc, about the size of a quarter, with a small LED light that blinked once when I pressed it. A GPS tracker. Someone had planted a tracking device in my son's backpack. Not random criminals, not paranoid delusions. Someone was actively hunting us, and they'd been following our every move since we left Bremerton. My hands shook as I turned the device over. No markings, no manufacturer name, professional grade. The kind of thing that cost money and required technical knowledge. When had they planted it? Before Marcus's call? After? Had they been watching our house, waiting for us to run, knowing Marcus would warn me? I wanted to smash it against the wall, destroy it, but that would tell them something was wrong. If they were monitoring it remotely and suddenly lost our signal, they'd know I'd found it. Better to keep moving, let them think they still had the advantage. I carefully placed it back in, Devin's backpack, my mind racing. Marcus said ditch the car in Wyoming. That meant they might have a second tracker on the Subaru, or they were monitoring rental car databases, or both. I needed to abandon every traceable asset, but first, I needed to know who they were. I pulled out my laptop and did something risky. I logged into Marcus's personal email account. I knew his password. We'd always shared them, one of those trust exercises married couples do. The account opened without issue. His inbox was full of the usual Cluttership bulletins, promotional emails, messages from other sailors. But there was one folder I'd never noticed before, labeled Equipment Maintenance Logs. Boring. The kind of folder you'd scroll right past. I opened it. Inside were 15 emails, all from the past 4 months, all from different addresses I didn't recognize. I opened the most recent one, dated 2 weeks ago. Your suspicions are correct. Confirmed 3 additional incidents. Pattern suggests deliberate action, not malfunction. Whatever you do, don't file an official report through a chain of command. You're looking at something that goes very high up. Document everything offline. Stay safe. L. I opened another email, from 3 months ago. Marcus found the manufacturing defect you mentioned. You're right to be concerned. These units should never have passed inspection. Someone overrode the safety protocols. I'm copying everything I have to a secure drive. If something happens to me, you'll need this evidence. Chen, a third email, from 4 months ago, was more explicit. Lieutenant Wright, what you've discovered is beyond department level. This involves contractors, procurement officers, possibly flag rank personnel. The financial incentive alone is in the billions. If you go public with this before we have airtight evidence, they'll bury you and everyone you love. Collect proof, but stay quiet. We're working on a strategy. Cap T. Reynolds. Redder. My head was spinning. Marcus had discovered something about defective equipment that had passed inspections despite safety failures. Equipment someone high-ranking had deliberately approved, probably in exchange for bribes or kickbacks, the kind of military-industrial corruption that made headlines when it was exposed. The kind of corruption that powerful people would kill to protect. I scrolled through more emails, piecing together the story. Marcus and several others, someone named L, someone named Chen, a retired captain named Reynold, had been quietly investigating weapons systems malfunctions on the Roosevelt, missile guidance systems that failed during routine tests, torpedo tubes that misfired, radar equipment that showed phantom readings. Each incident had been blamed on operator error or routine technical problems, but Marcus had noticed a pattern. All the faulty equipment came from the same defense contractor, a company called Dalton Systems Group. All of it had been installed in the past year, and all of it had passed Navy inspections despite documented safety concerns. Someone at Dalton was manufacturing defective weapons systems. Someone in the Navy was approving them anyway, and when Marcus got too close to exposing the scheme, they'd come after him, and now they were coming after us. A sound in the hallway made me freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, stopping outside our door. I held my breath. The footsteps moved on, probably another guest heading to their room, but my nerves were shot. We needed to move. Now, I woke Devin at 5 a.m., telling him we were starting our drive early to beat traffic. He was too sleepy to argue, stumbling to the car in his pajamas while I carried our bags. The parking lot was empty, lit by sodium lights that made everything look jaundiced and wrong. As I loaded the trunk, I noticed something. A white panel van parked 3 spaces down, engine running despite the early hour. The windows were tinted. I couldn't see inside. I buckled Devin in quickly and started the Subaru, pulling out of the lot faster than necessary. In my rearview mirror, the white van didn't move. 2 blocks away, I allowed myself to breathe. We drove through the empty streets of Salt Lake City as the sun rose, painting the Wasatch Mountains in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful and indifferent to the terror racing through my veins. At a gas station on the outskirts of town, I filled up and bought coffee I wouldn't drink. While Devin used the bathroom, I walked around the Subaru, looking for anything unusual. Their magnetic GPS tracker under the rear wheel well, barely visible unless you were looking for it. I left it there. Let them think they still had us. We crossed into Wyoming around 9 a.m. The landscape flattened into endless prairie, wind turbines spinning against a gray sky. Near a town called Evanston, I spotted what I needed, a Greyhound bus station attached to a McDonald's. I parked behind the building where the Subaru couldn't be seen from the street, grabbed our bags, and walked Devin inside. He was confused about why we were leaving the car, but I bribed him with chicken nuggets and a promise that this was part of the adventure. At the ticket counter, I bought 2 tickets to Omaha, Nebraska, paying cash. The clerk, a woman with purple hair and multiple facial piercings, didn't ask questions. We boarded the bus 20 minutes later. As we pulled away from the station, I watched through the rear window. The Subaru sat alone in the parking lot, still broadcasting our location to whoever was tracking us. Let them follow an empty car. Let them waste time searching Evanston while we disappeared into the anonymous gray of interstate bus travel. Devin fell asleep against my shoulder as Wyoming rolled past all sagebrush and antelope and enormous sky. I kept my phone off, the tracking device still in his backpack, and tried to formulate a plan that didn't end with us dead. Marcus had said 2 more days. 2 more days until he could reach us, until he could explain, until this nightmare had some kind of resolution. I just had to keep Devin safe for 2 more days, and figure out how to expose a military corruption scheme before the people behind it made us disappear. No pressure. The Greyhound bus smelled like stale coffee and recycled air. Devin dozed against the window while I sat rigid in my seat, watching every passenger who boarded at each stop. An elderly woman with knitting needles. A college kid with headphones and a skateboard. A businessman in a rumpled suit who looked like he'd given up on life. None of them looked like killers. But then again, I had no idea what killers looked like anymore. We'd been on the road for 6 hours, passing through Green River and Rawlins, tiny Wyoming towns that appeared and disappeared like mirages. The landscape was hypnotic in its emptiness, rolling brown hills, patches of snow in the shadows, the occasional ranch house standing alone against the wind. At a rest stop near Laramie, I carried Devin to the bathroom while keeping my hand on his shoulder, paranoid about letting him out of my sight even for a second. We bought snacks from vending machines, trail mix, and fruit snacks that would pass for dinner. I checked my phone briefly. No new messages from Marcus. Back on the bus, a new passenger boarded. A woman in her mid-50s, wearing jeans and a University of Colorado sweatshirt, carrying a worn duffel bag. She had short gray hair and sharp eyes that swept the bus with the kind of awareness I'd learned to recognize military or law enforcement training. She chose the seat directly across the aisle from us, despite a dozen empty rows. Not a coincidence. I tensed, ready to grab Devin and run if necessary. But the woman simply pulled out a paperback and began reading, seemingly uninterested in us. 20 minutes later, as the bus rolled through the outskirts of Cheyenne, she spoke without looking up from her book. "Your husband asked me to keep an eye on you." My heart stopped. I didn't respond, didn't move. Marcus Wright, Weapons Systems Officer, currently AWOL from the USS Theodore Roosevelt. "You're Vanessa. That's Devin." She turned a page in her book, still not looking at me. "My name's Andrea Moss. I'm a friend. I don't know what you're talking about. Smart. Don't trust easily. But you've got a GPS tracker in your kid's backpack that you found last night in Salt Lake City. You left your Subaru in Evanston with a second tracker still attached. You're heading east, probably to Marcus's parents in Ohio, which is a mistake because that's where they'll expect you to go." She knew too much, way too much. Which meant she was either genuinely helping us or this was an elaborate trap. "Who are you really?" Andrea finally looked at me. Her eyes were gray and tired, with the kind of weariness that came from seeing too much. "I'm someone who made the mistake of investigating Dalton Systems Group 10 years ago. Lost my career, nearly lost my life. I've been watching Marcus's investigation from the outside, feeding him information where I could. When he went dark 2 days ago, he sent me an emergency message with your location and asked me to help. How do I know you're telling the truth?" She reached into her jacket. I tensed and pulled out a small photograph, handing it across the aisle. It showed her younger, in Marine Corps dress uniform, standing next to a man in Navy dress whites. The man was Marcus, 15 years younger, barely recognizable without the crow's feet and the weight of responsibility. Marcus and I served together at Naval Station Norfolk, back when I was still in. I was a military investigator, NCIS. I noticed discrepancies in contractor equipment, started asking questions I shouldn't have asked. They forced me out before I could finish the investigation. Dishonorably discharged on trumped-up charges. I lost my pension, my reputation, everything. She put the photo away. "Your husband found the same pattern I did. Dalton Systems has been supplying defective equipment to the Navy for years, bribing procurement officers and inspectors to look the other way. When something fails and sailors die, they blame operator error. It's been going on for at least a decade, maybe longer. Sailors have died?" My voice came out as a whisper. 3 confirmed incidents that I know of. A missile malfunction on the USS Michael Murphy killed 2 sailors in 2019. Radar failure on the USS Fitzgerald contributed to the collision that killed 7 in 2017. A torpedo tube explosion on the USS Connecticut last year injured 11, all blamed on human error. All involved Dalton equipment. The horror of it settled over me like a weight. People had died, families had been destroyed, and it was all covered up to protect defense contractor profits and corrupt officials. What does Marcus want me to do? He's gathering evidence documents, testimony from other sailors who've noticed problems, financial records showing the bribes. But he needs time, and he needs you and Devin safe. The people behind this have unlimited resources. They'll kill to protect this. They already tried. 2 men broke into our house. Andrea nodded. That was Dalton's private security team. Former military, now corporate mercenaries. They've been tracking you since Bremerton. The good news is you lost them in Evanston. The bad news is they're not stupid. They'll figure out the bus eventually. So what do? We get off in Omaha, but we don't stay. There's a safe house 3 hours north in Sioux City. Someone Marcus trusts. We hole up there until he can reach us. Why should I trust you? Andrea leaned back in her seat, her expression hardening. Because I've spent 10 years trying to expose these bastards, and your husband is the first person who's gotten close enough to actually do it. If he goes down, I lose my only chance at justice. If you die, he'll give up the fight to save his own life. So we're all in this together whether we like it or not. It was the most brutally honest thing anyone had said to me in days, and somehow, that honesty made me believe her. Okay, Sioux City. But the tracker in Devon's backpack, leave it. We'll ditch it before we get off the bus. Let them think you're still heading to Omaha. The landscape outside shifted from Wyoming's brown emptiness to Nebraska's flat farmland. The sun was setting, painting everything in orange and shadow. Devon woke up and asked if we were almost to Grandma and Grandpa's house. I told him soon, hating myself for the lie. At 8 p.m., we pulled into the Omaha bus station, a squat concrete building surrounded by parking lots and chain restaurants. Andrea stood up as passengers began filing off. Stay close. Don't look at anyone directly. Just follow me. We were excited with the crowd. Andrea led us through the station to the bathrooms. Inside the women's restroom, she pulled Devon's backpack from my shoulder and removed the GPS tracker, dropping it into the trash can. They'll track it here. Think you're still in Omaha. Buys us a few hours. We left through a side exit and walked 3 blocks to a parking garage where Andrea had left a nondescript gray Honda Accord. No questions about how she'd known which bus we'd be on, or how long she'd been following us. Some things didn't need explaining. The drive to Sioux City took us north on I-29, through darkness broken only by scattered farmhouse lights. Devon fell asleep in the back seat. I sat in the passenger seat, watching Andrea drive with the calm competence of someone who'd done this before. How many people are involved in this? I asked. In the conspiracy? At Dalton? Maybe 20 executives and engineers who know the equipment is defective. In the Navy? At least a dozen procurement officers. Inspectors, maybe a few admirals. Then there are the politicians who receive Dalton's campaign contributions and look the other way. All told? Probably 50 to 100 people who are either actively participating or willfully ignorant. And they'll kill to protect it. They already have. The engineer who was going to testify, Chen, from the emails you found, he died in a car accident 3 weeks ago. Single vehicle crash. Investigators ruled it a brake failure. My stomach turned. Brake failure. From a Dalton-manufactured braking system, ironically. They're not subtle, and they don't need to be. Who's going to investigate the investigators? Around 11 p.m., we pulled up to a farmhouse 10 miles outside Sioux City. The building was old but well-maintained, with a wraparound porch and a barn out back. Lights were on inside. Andrea killed the engine. This belongs to Daniel Reynold, retired Navy captain. He's been helping Marcus gather evidence. The one from the emails. The same. He's risked everything to help expose this. If Dalton finds out he's involved, he's dead. A man appeared on the porch, 60s, white hair, military bearing even in civilian clothes. Captain Reynold. He watched us approach with cautious eyes. Andrea, you had a good time. Captain. This is Vanessa Wright and her son Devon. Reynolds' expression softened as he looked at Devon sleeping in my arms. Come inside. You're safe here. For now. The farmhouse interior was warm and cluttered with books, photographs of Navy ships, commendations in frames. A life of service reduced to wall decorations. Reynolds showed us to a guest bedroom upstairs where I could put Devon down. Your husband is a brave man, he said quietly as I tucked Devon in. Foolish, perhaps, but brave. He's fighting an enemy that most people don't even know exists. Will it work? Can he actually expose them? Reynolds' silence was answer enough. Downstairs, Andrea was making coffee. Reynolds sat at the kitchen table with a laptop open, showing satellite imagery of something I couldn't quite make out. Marcus is currently in San Diego, he said. He jumped ship in Pearl Harbor 2 days ago, hitched a ride on a cargo plane. He's meeting with a journalist from the Washington Post tomorrow morning. Someone who's been investigating defense contractor fraud for years. If he can get his evidence to her, if she publishes it, the story becomes too big to suppress. And if he can't, then they'll kill him, kill you, kill everyone who knows. And the corruption continues. I sat down heavily, the weight of it crushing me. My husband was risking his life to expose criminals who'd already murdered to protect their secrets. And I was sitting in a stranger's farmhouse with my 6-year-old son, hoping that somehow, impossibly, we'd all survive this. What do you need from me? I asked. Andrea and Reynold exchanged glances. Testimony, Andrea said. When this goes public, you'll need to confirm Marcus's actions, explain why he went AWOL, and humanize the story. The Navy will try to paint him as a deserter or a traitor. You're his credibility. And if they come for us before then we run again, Andrea said simply. And we keep running until Marcus wins or we're dead. It wasn't comforting, but it was honest. And in that moment, honesty was all I had left to hold on to. The morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. I'd spent the night on Captain Reynolds' couch, unable to sleep, checking my phone every 15 minutes for messages that never came. Andrea kept watch by the window, a handgun I hadn't noticed before resting on the side table next to her coffee. Devin woke up at 7, confused about the strange house but excited when Reynolds made him pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse, apparently a skill every grandfather learned. I watched my son eat breakfast, laughing at something the captain said, and marveled at his resilience. To him, this was still an adventure. He had no idea that his father was about to either save our lives or destroy them. At 8:47 a.m. Pacific Time, 10:47 our time, Marcus was supposed to meet Jennifer Hartley, the Washington Post journalist, at a coffee shop in San Diego. She'd been investigating defense contractor fraud for 3 years, had published exposés on waste and corruption that had led to congressional hearings. If anyone could tell this story and make people listen, it was her. Andrea's phone buzzed at 10:52. She answered immediately, listened without speaking, then hung up. He made contact. They're talking now. The next 2 hours were agony. Captain Reynolds tried to distract me with conversation about Navy history, about his own career, about anything except what was happening 2,000 miles away. It didn't work. I paced the farmhouse, checked my phone obsessively, and imagined every worst-case scenario. What if Dalton had found Marcus? What if the journalist didn't believe him? What if they'd been watching her too, waiting for someone like Marcus to reach out? At 1:15 p.m., my phone finally rang. Unknown number, California area code. Hello? Vanessa, Marcus's voice, rough with exhaustion and emotion. Are you safe? I started crying before I could answer. I'm fine. Devin's fine. Where are you? Still in San Diego. It's done. V. I gave her everything: documents, testimony, financial records, video evidence of the defective equipment. She's already fact-checking with her editors. The story goes live tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? That's so fast. She said this is too important to sit on. Once it's published, I'm protected by whistleblower laws. They can't make me disappear without everyone knowing why. What about us? Are we safe? A pause. Not yet. Not until the story breaks. Reynolds and Andrea will keep you protected tonight. Tomorrow morning, when the Post publishes, I need you to release a video statement I recorded. It's on a secure drive that Andrea has. Your testimony corroborating everything. The phone call, the chase, the threats. It humanizes the story, makes it harder for them to spin. Marcus, what's going to happen to you? Another pause, longer. I'll face court-martial for going AWOL. Probably get a dishonorable discharge, maybe prison time depending on how vindictive the Navy wants to be. But I'll be alive, and so will you and Devin. That's what matters. This is going to destroy your career. My career was already destroyed the moment I realized what was happening and decided not to look away. Some things matter more than careers, V. I wiped my eyes, trying to keep my voice steady. When do I see you? Soon. Maybe a week. Maybe a month. Depends on military, police, and lawyers and a lot of things I can't control. But I'm coming home, I promise. I love you. I love you too, both of you, more than anything. Tell Devin his dad's sorry about the adventure not being more fun. The call ended. I stood in Captain Reynolds' kitchen, holding my phone, feeling the weight of 12 years of marriage and one terrible week pressing down on me. Marcus had sacrificed everything: his career, his freedom, possibly his future, to do the right thing, to stop people from dying because of corporate greed and military corruption. And tomorrow, the world would know. Andrea handed me a USB drive. The video's on here. When the Post story goes live at 6 a.m. Eastern, you upload this to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. Tag major news outlets, use hashtags, make it impossible to ignore. What happens after that? Media frenzy, congressional investigations, lawsuits. Some people will go to prison. Dalton Systems will probably collapse. The Navy will have to answer uncomfortable questions about procurement oversight. It'll be ugly and complicated, and it won't fix everything, but it's a start. Captain Reynolds emerged from his office with printed pages. I've been monitoring communications. Dalton's security team is still searching for you in Omaha. They haven't figured out you left the bus yet. By the time they do, it won't matter. Once the story breaks, coming after you becomes too risky. That night, I barely slept again. Devin was peaceful in the guest bedroom, dreaming whatever 6-year-olds dream about. I sat up with Andrea and the captain, watching the clock count down to 6 a.m. At 5:58 Eastern Time, Andrea refreshed the Washington Post website. Nothing yet. At 6, she refreshed again. The headline appeared, "Defective by Design. How Defense Contractor Dalton Systems Supplied Faulty Weapons to the U.S. Navy, while bribing officials to hide fatal malfunctions." Below it, Jennifer Hartley's byline. Below that, the subheading, "Whistleblower documents reveal decade-long conspiracy that led to multiple sailor deaths." I read the first paragraph, then the second, seeing Marcus's evidence laid out in careful journalistic prose. The defective missile guidance systems, the falsified inspection reports, the bribe payments to procurement officers, the sailors who died when equipment failed at critical moments. All of it documented, verified, impossible to deny. And there, halfway through the article, Marcus's name, Lieutenant Marcus Wright, a weapons systems officer aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt, risked his career and safety to expose the conspiracy. "Upload your video now," Andrea said. My hands shook as I opened my laptop, logged into every social media account I had, and uploaded the video Marcus had recorded. In it, he sat in some anonymous motel room, wearing civilian clothes, looking exhausted but determined. He explained everything what he'd discovered, why he'd gone AWOL, why he'd warned me to run. He named names, showed documents, spoke directly to the camera with the calm authority of someone who knew he was right. My phone exploded with notifications before I'd even finished uploading. Everywhere. News outlets were already picking up the story. Number Dalton scandal was trending. Within an hour, CNN had it as breaking news. By noon, it was the lead story on every major network. Senator after senator issued statements demanding investigations. The Secretary of the Navy announced a full review of procurement procedures. Dalton Systems' stock price plummeted. 3 executives resigned before lunch. The dominoes were falling. At 3 p.m., my phone rang. Marcus's mother, crying, asking if we were okay and if Marcus was safe. I told her everything would be fine, not knowing if that was true but needing to believe it. At 6 p.m., military police arrested 4 Navy procurement officers at bases across the country. The charges: bribery, fraud, and negligent homicide. At 9 p.m., the FBI raided Dalton Systems headquarters in Virginia. By midnight, the company's CEO was in custody. And through it all, Devin played with toys in Captain Reynolds' living room, occasionally asking when we could go home. Soon, I told him. Very soon. 3 days later, Marcus surrendered himself to military police at Naval Base San Diego. His lawyer, provided pro bono by a whistleblower advocacy group, said the court-martial would be swift. Given the circumstances, given the evidence he'd exposed, given the public support, they expected minimal punishment, maybe a reprimand, maybe an honorable discharge instead of dishonorable, maybe even recognition for doing the right thing. But none of that was guaranteed. I flew to San Diego with Devin the day before the hearing. We stayed at a hotel near the base, and in the morning Marcus walked into the courtroom in his dress uniform. I was there in the front row with our son. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Witnesses testified. Lawyers argued. Marcus sat stoically through all of it, occasionally glancing back at us with a small smile. When the verdict came, it was better than we'd hoped. Honorable discharge, no prison time, full pension. The presiding officer noted that Lieutenant Wright had acted in accordance with the highest traditions of the naval service in exposing corruption that endangered lives. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Marcus held Devin's hand in mine, speaking calmly about duty and accountability and how no career was worth the lives of sailors who trusted their equipment. That night, in our hotel room, After Devin fell asleep between us, Marcus and I finally talked about what came next. A new life outside the Navy. A new career, new challenges, new normal. We'd lost our home in Bremerton. I'd never felt safe there again. We'd lost the military community that had defined our marriage. We'd lost the certainty of a planned future. But we'd gained something more important. The knowledge that when it mattered most, when lives hung in the balance, we'd made the right choice. Marcus had refused to look away from corruption. I'd trusted him even when nothing made sense. And together, we'd survived. No more late-night phone calls? I asked, my head on his shoulder. No more late-night phone calls, he promised. From now on, the most exciting thing in our life will be Devin's soccer games. I can live with that. Me too. 3 months later, Congress passed new legislation strengthening whistleblower protections for military personnel. The Dalton Systems executives went on trial facing decades in prison. The Navy overhauled its procurement oversight procedures. Families of sailors who died in the malfunctions received official apologies and compensation. And in a small house in Columbus, Ohio, near Marcus's parents, far from the Navy and the ocean and the life we'd left behind, our family started over. Devin started second grade, made new friends, never quite understood why our adventure had been necessary, but knew his dad was a hero. Marcus found work as a defense industry consultant, helping companies implement ethical manufacturing practices. Ironic, maybe, but fitting. And I wrote a book about those 7 days, the phone call, the run, the fear, the truth. It became a bestseller, was optioned for a movie, and sparked conversations about military accountability. But more than any of that, it reminded people of something crucial, that ordinary people, when faced with impossible choices, can still choose courage, can still choose truth, can still change the world, one terrifying phone call at a time. And sometimes, when the phone rings at 3 a.m. now, I still wake up with my heart pounding. But it's always just a wrong number or a spam call, nothing that matters, because the real call, the one that changed everything, already came, and we answered it right. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.